Well, the 2023 college football season has come to an end, and it is time for the final "Your Season is Over" video for this football season. And, technically the season is over for everybody, but y'all know the point of this video by now if you've been watching this channel for any amount of time at all. This is the point and laugh video, bowl game and playoff edition. Sorry it's a day late. I recorded this big, long, pointless and ridiculous intro like I normally do for these "Your Season is Over" videos. And I sat down yesterday and started editing the video, and my computer crashed and everything I had edited was gone. And to be honest, I'm just not going to sit down and redo it all. So this is what you're going to get. We'll just skip the intro and we'll just go straight to the point and laugh and making fun of these loser teams that couldn't manage to find a way to win their game in the postseason. Now, let's start real quick at the very end. Unfortunately, what we were all told as children growing up, as kids growing up by our parents and whoever else, has turned out, at least in this case, not to be true. The old adage that you were told as you were growing up, cheaters never win and winners never cheat. We've all heard that expression. Turns out it's not true. Hail to the cheaters. For those of you stuck in a maze haze, congratulations. Michigan is your 2023 college football national champion. Now, nothing will ever change that. I keep reminding Michigan fans of that. Nothing will ever change that. Whether or whatever the NCAA ends up doing a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, or whether they end up doing nothing a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, nothing will change the fact that we all watched the national championship game Monday night, and we all saw Michigan beat Washington. We all saw Michigan hoist the trophy. We all saw the graphics on the TV proclaiming Michigan as the 2023 college football national champions. And that fact will never change from now to the end of time. That's true. And you have to be okay with that. As far as all of the other noise, well, you're going to hear it from now to the end of time. I went over this yesterday in my wrap-up video about the national title game, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today. But the overwhelming majority of college football fans are going to look at Michigan in 2023 and say they won the national title, but they got caught cheating. That's just never going to end. Part of that is just sort of the social media environment that we all live in now. Where we always have to tear things down. Again, like I mentioned yesterday, Georgia, who won the national title over the last 2 years. I've been told every day of the week for 2 years straight that neither one of those titles matter. So do I feel sorry for Michigan fans that are going to have to hear basically that same thing for a different reason for the rest of their lives? No, this is the world we live in. And the reality is, you were cheating. You did get caught cheating. You got punished for the cheating. I mean, there's no logical way to, even for a Michigan fan, there's no logical way to deny the obvious, which is you broke the rules, cheating, you got caught. I mean, we all saw it in real time, and we all spent way too much time talking about it this season, but it was a rare circumstance in that normally we don't find out about these kinds of things until years down the road. Whoever you want, whether Southern Cal back in the mid-2000s, we didn't know about that in real time. We didn't find out until years later. Tennessee a few years ago with Jeremy Pruitt, we didn't find out until years later. Ole Miss under Hugh Freeze, you didn't find out till it was all over after a year later. It was just rare with Michigan that we as a college football public found out about this cheating in real time as it was happening. And I think that more than anything else is what led to sort of the infatuation or attention, whatever you want to call it, that this particular cheating scandal received. It's a little bit harder to work yourself up about cheating that happened in the past. When we all discovered the Connor Stallions thing and disguises on the sidelines and buying tickets to all these opponents' games and all that kind of thing. It was not necessarily the worst cheating thing we've ever heard. In fact, it's probably far from it. But the fact that we found out about it as it was happening is what made this situation so unique in terms of how it was covered. And when I say how it was covered, I'm talking about everybody from the corporate, watered down vanilla media like ESPN and Fox Sports and all the national blogs and all that, down to your regular average idiots like me. We had never seen something like this in real time. Now, you've got some segment of the college football population that constantly runs around claiming everybody is cheating, especially everybody that's winning. Now, those people are just retarded, and that's just a loser's excuse mentality, right? We've been hearing about Bama cheating for 15 years. Why? They've been winning for 15 years. Now you hear about Georgia cheating. Why? They've been winning for a couple of years. LSU was cheating in 2019. Clemson was cheating in 16 and 18. I mean, y'all know these people, right? Every team that wins is cheating. They must be buying players. They must be doing this. They must be paying the refs. They must be in bed with the conference commissioner, whatever. Now, all that's just bullshit and ridiculous. Typing on the internet that someone is cheating does not mean someone is cheating. That's not the case with Michigan. I didn't hear anybody, not a soul, running around accusing Michigan of cheating in week 3 of this season, or week 2, or week 4. No one accused Michigan of cheating until we were all presented in real time with the evidence that Michigan was cheating. So look, Michigan fans just need to accept, okay, we were cheating and we got caught. We still went out. We went 15-0. We enjoyed the season. You just have to accept that. And you've got to accept the fact that everyone else is going to refer to your title in 2023 as an asterisk title or a tainted title, or yeah, they won the title, but they were cheating. It's just that debate's not going away. The accusation's not going away. People on the internet are going to continue to refer to this team as cheaters. I mean, it's just what it is. You've got to get over it as Michigan fans. And, like I said, it really doesn't matter whether you actually cheated or not in terms of what people would say. Even if this Connor Stallion sign stealing, cheating scandal never emerged or never happened, I'm sure there are people on the internet that would run around right now and accuse Michigan of cheating because, like I said, that's just what people do these days on social media. But anyway, Michigan did win. But let's get to the point and laugh section. We're going to go back to the beginning now, start with some of the earlier bowl games. Look, my thoughts on these bowl games are well known. I don't have a problem. They could have 500 bowl games for all I care. If I don't like a bowl game, I don't have to watch it. My opinion of the bowl season, though, is that it has become watered down for a couple of different reasons. One being the college football playoffs. So much emphasis is put on making the playoffs that if you don't make it, whatever game you end up in seems devalued. I think another big part of the bowl season, problem with the bowl season, is that I do think there's too many. And again, I understand the argument that, well, if you don't want to watch it, you don't have to watch it. You're 100% right. I get that. But when there's 40 bowl games and half of them are involving teams that no one watches during the regular season, teams that win, in some cases, 5 games, and in a lot of cases, 6 games, when you spend the first 10 days of bowl season watching 5 and 6 win teams play, it to me anyway, it devalues what you get at the end of bowl season, like the New Year's Six, Citrus Bowls, even beyond the New Year's Six, teams that, 8, 9, 10 win teams that didn't quite make the New Year's Six, but they're interesting games or whatever. But because we've been bombarded for 10 days prior to that with just these honestly terrible games, it creates just sort of this feeling that, of bowls not being that important. And then, of course, you combine that with the fact that the players obviously feel the same way, which is why they quit and don't play in these things. Then it's just created a scenario where bowl season, at least to me, just doesn't represent what it used to represent. And I know that things change over time. And look, I'm a proponent of the college football playoff. I have loved the playoff era. I'm a proponent of the 12-team playoff that we're going to starting next year. So I realized that I'm trying to kind of have my cake and eat it too. I miss what bowl season used to be. I also enjoy what we now get in terms of a playoff and what we are going to get going forward as a playoff. So I realized that me complaining about it probably comes off a little bit hypocritical because I'm sort of arguing both sides of the same coin. But anyway, I do watch a lot of bowl games. I will admit that some of the earlier bowl games, unless it's involving a team that I'm interested in for some reason, or it's a game that I think will be a good game, I don't watch a lot of the early bowl games. I just don't. But let's start with some of the earlier ones that did catch my attention for one reason or another. We're going to do it a little different. I'm just going to take the helmets down one at a time. Like I said, I recorded the intro. I went through, took the helmets off, dramatic music, slow motion, blah, 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 the dumb shit that, look, a lot of y'all complain about the intro anyway. So I'm going to go through, I copious notes. I'm going to go through this game by game, and I'll take the helmets down as we go. Up first, what do we have here? Oh, no, this is amazing. Is that right? Did I write that right? Did I write this down right? I guess I did. Let's start with this one. Oh, my God. Now, this is, I'm going to admit, this is going to be less about the team that lost and more about the team that won. But what are we looking for here? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, P. Here we go. How about this? We start here. Central Florida. Man. Welcome to the Power 5, Central Florida. You did become bowl eligible in your first year in the Power 5. And you got a favorable matchup in your bowl game because they matched you up with Georgia Tech. Yet you somehow still managed to lose to the Nerds 30-17. This is absolutely unbelievable for Georgia Tech. They've made their first bowl game for the first time since anybody can remember, and they managed to win it. So shout out to Georgia Tech for that, I guess. Winning this bowl game is probably Georgia Tech's biggest accomplishment since losing to Georgia by 8 points or whatever it was in their regular season finale. I have never in my life seen a fan base brag about losing a game as much as I saw Georgia Tech fans bragging about their loss to Georgia. It's unbelievable how far a program has fallen that they would reduce themselves to bragging online about a loss. Oh, you didn't cover the spread. Spread is for gambling degenerates like me. Do you really think these football teams give a fuck about covering the spread or not? I will admit there are a handful of coaches in college football who do seem to know the spread. And you can sort of see this play out in the fourth quarter of some games. But generally speaking, these coaches and these teams and these players don't give one hoot or a country fucking holler about whether or not they cover the spread. What happens in the fourth quarters of a lot of these games that have big spreads? Let's just say there's some team out there somewhere that's favored by 24. And in the fourth quarter, they're up by 28. Well, they're covering the spread. That's great. What do? Take all the starters out, put the woozies in, let the other team score garbage points in the fourth quarter. Next thing you know, instead of covering that 24-point spread, you've done won the game by 21. And then you got idiots on the internet, Georgia Tech fans, that'll run around and go, you were favored by 1 million, but you only won by 900,000. Shout out to Georgia Tech, I guess. For not losing to Georgia by nearly as much as Vegas thought you would, or as people gambling on the game thought you would. What a huge moral victory for Georgia Tech, and they capped it off with a win over a first-year Power 5 program, Central Florida, and Goose Malzahn, the head coach down there at Central Florida. So, yeah, Central Florida, look, I don't care who you are. I don't care what team you are. I don't care what coach you are. I don't care what your record is. I don't care what conference you're in. I don't even care if you're Group of 5 or Power 5. If you lose to Georgia Tech, that's humiliating. Trust me, I know. Because way back in 2016, Georgia lost to Georgia Tech. Boy, has it really been that long? Wow, I guess it has. Man, shout out to Georgia Tech. But yes, Central Florida, your season is over. What do we have next? I know why I wanted to point this one out. Again, I think this is going to be more about the winner than it is the loser as well. Although I do have something to say about the losing team in this one. Utah. What in the world? I don't know what it is about Utah. Am I the only one? I find it I find it hard to rag on Utah. I don't really know why. Maybe it's because there's not a million Utah fans on the internet. So it's not really worth talking about Utah because there's no one to get riled up. Like I could spend 20 minutes trashing Utah. Who's going to get pissed off at that? The two Utah fans that exist. So maybe that's part of it. I think the other part of it is though that they do, for whatever reason. And I don't know if this is something that they've crafted themselves, but they feel like a permanent underdog story. And I don't really know why. They won the Pac-12 2 years in a row heading into this season. They've been one of the most consistently good programs over the last 10 to 15 years. They've got coaching consistency, at least at the head coach position. They've got some likable, known players. Now, the main one didn't play this year in Cam Rising. But for whatever reason, it's just like we always look at Utah as though we can't believe they won a game. Oh, my God, they beat such and such. Oh, my God. Well, they've been doing that for a decade. Now, not as good as they were, in 21 and 22, where they actually won the Pac-12, 22 especially, beating Southern Cal a second time to win the Pac-12 and knock the Trojans out of playoff contention. But this year was a disappointing year for Utah. And it sort of started right away when, Cam Rising was hurt, and there was a lot of, speculation. It's sort of weird when you look back on the Cam Rising situation this year. Who remembers the offseason? Utah was playing Florida in week 1. And there was a lot of people thought Cam Rising was going to play in that week 1 game. Like 50-50, like he's real close to being back. And then he didn't play. Now they won anyway because they played Florida. And pretty much everybody that played Florida won because they're just a garbage can program. They're in the fucking gutter, Florida is. But it's hard to believe that we were sort of led to believe that, look, Cam Rising is probably going to play week 1. He didn't play. Then he didn't play week 2. Didn't play week 3. Didn't play week 4. Didn't play week 5. Didn't play week 6. And then people, what's going on here? What's the deal? And then there was like a controversy about the team doctor versus Cam Rising's personal family doctor. The team doctor said he was cleared, but the family doctor said no, he needs more time. And I don't know how much truth there was to that story. It was never really directly addressed by Utah. Cam Rising was asked about it, but he gave sort of a non-answer. But and then next thing you know, there's like 3-4 games left in the season or whatever, and we find out Cam Rising's not going to play. He's going to take a medical redshirt year, and he'll be back next year. That whole thing was just weird to me. I know teams don't like to sort of tip their hand when it comes to injuries or the availability of a player. They kind of like to string the other teams along so that, the other team has to sit there and go, maybe he is playing, maybe he's not. We got to prepare for this quarterback and that quarterback, that kind of thing. But the whole Cam Rising thing this year just seemed weird to me. But Utah did lose in their bowl game to Northwestern. Northwestern beat Utah 14-7. And look, Northwestern was a one-win team last year. One-win team last year, 2022. Not only that, they had a brand new head coach this year. Why? Ding-a-ling car wash. We all remember the offseason, the allegations came out of hazing at Northwestern involving some just ridiculous behavior in the locker room, and the head coach ended up getting fired. Now, it's one thing, anytime you replace a head coach, right, you don't really know what to expect going into the next season. But in the case of Northwestern, you're coming off of a one-win season. And on top of that, you were forced to replace your coach, not in December or January the year before, where your new coach would have, an entire spring to go through, an entire offseason, all that kind of stuff. No, this coach was fired and the new coach was named literally a couple of months before the season started, just sort of thrown into the fire. Here's a terrible team that won one game last year in one of the best conferences in the country, Big Ten. So you're going to have a tough schedule again, probably in the Big Ten. And not only that, there's a lot of outside distraction and noise because half your team had their ding-a-lings hanging out and slapping freshmen on the chin with it, or whatever, and we had to fire him. So it was just, this guy walked into a complete mess at Northwestern. And what did he do? He took that 1-11 team, and not only did he get him bowl eligible at 7-5, he went out and won his bowl game over a good Utah team. And I know, look, these bowl games, this person didn't play, that person didn't play. Okay, great. They still beat Utah, one of the most consistently good programs in the country over the last 10 to 15 years. They beat them to finish 8-5. That's remarkable. They took a 1-win team and turned it into an 8-win team without College Game Day and Fox noon kickoff and every other national media personality or publication or TV show slobbing all over their knob for the entire offseason in the first month of the season like they did at Colorado. Another team coming off of a 1-win season the year before that also changed coaching staffs. The difference, of course, Northwestern went about their business quietly in a football manner and turned a 1-win team into an 8-win team. Because they have a head coach who's an actual football coach. Colorado, on the other hand, Neon Prime Dion goes in there and turns a 1-win team into a 4-win team. Amazing. Unbelievable. Northwestern won twice as many games as you did, and they inherited a much worse situation. Much worse. Shout out to Northwestern for hiring an actual football coach. Instead of a team mom with a gold whistle, which is the direction they decided to go in over at Colorado. What do we want to do now? Kansas beat UNLV? Unbelievable. Speaking of UNLV, shout out to Southern Cal's new quarterback, Dwayne Johnson, who was... Whatever this guy, I don't know who this guy is. Rocky Maivia, I don't know, something Maivia, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, whatever, this quarterback at UNLV that entered the transfer portal, thought about going to Georgia, changed his mind, now he's going to Southern Cal. Much better fit for him at Southern Cal, I think. He's got a chance to start there. He's a good quarterback. He wasn't going to start at Georgia. Carson Beck's coming back. He probably would have been QB3 at Georgia. He would have been ahead of the true freshman Puglisi that's coming in. He would have been behind, obviously, Carson Beck and Gunnar Stockton, who's been in the program for 3 years now. So probably better that he sticks out there and goes to Southern Cal where he can actually compete for the starting job. But UNLV lost to Kansas 49-36. Kansas finished 9-4. This is 2 pretty good years in a row for Kansas. Let's give them some credit. They're basketball skew. No one pays attention to them, really. The last couple of years, they've got a couple of wins that were kind of out of the blue that no one expected. And here they are this year, finishing up with a bowl win over UNLV and going 9-4. Rocky Maivia, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, the Wrestler, whatever QB for UNLV, 300 yards in that game, in that loss to Kansas. But yards is not his problem. And neither is touchdowns, really. He's a turnover machine, that Maivia. He had way too many interceptions, and he had 2 in the bowl game. But anyway, I don't have much to say about him. I wish him nothing but the best there at Southern Cal. All right, let's take another helmet down now. We got to take this one down. I thought about taking every single school in this conference's helmet down because they're that damn bad. They are that damn bad. Louisville, the second best team. See how we want to do these helmets here. Trying to keep these helmets stacked up in somewhat of an orderly fashion here so we can show them off at the end. But Louisville shit all over their own foot in a bowl game against Southern Cal. The second best team the ACC had to offer. Louisville, team that damn near beat Florida State in the ACC title game. Florida State couldn't even get a first down against them. What did Southern Cal do with their 4th string backups? They beat them 42-28. Look, Florida State wants to whine and moan and bitch and complain about whatever players they had that quit and didn't want to show up for their ass beating in the Orange Bowl. Southern Cal's entire team quit, including a player in Caleb Williams who's way better than anybody on Florida State's roster. None of their wide receivers played. Anybody that was any good on their defense, which isn't very many people, but anybody that is any good had hit the transfer portal. The defensive coordinator had been fired. Southern Cal was just a complete fucking mess at the end of the season. So they cobbled together whatever was left of that terrible team they had this year. A 7-5 team Southern Cal was. Wow, unbelievable. And they showed up and beat a fully stocked Louisville team like a drum, 42-28. The minute I saw this game, that was all the confirmation I needed that the playoff committee had got it right with Florida State. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. It's been talked about for 30 days. Florida State had no business near the college football playoff. There's plenty of proof of that. This is just another piece of that proof. But Southern Cal came out and absolutely destroyed. The Southern Cal was about the 6th or 7th best team in the Pac-12. They came out and absolutely destroyed the second best team in the ACC in Louisville. Again, Louisville was fully stocked in this game. Southern Cal was playing players that had not played all year, 3rd and 4th string people. Absolutely pitiful and pathetic performance by the ACC here. They got embarrassed, humiliated, annihilated. They ought to be ashamed of themselves, but they're not. I don't know what it is about the ACC. The ACC has no shame. The ACC has got no shame at all, but Louisville, what a joke of a performance. Second best team in the ACC, absolutely dominated and humiliated. Speaking of humiliating, Texas A&M capped off yet another disappointing season out in Aggie land. They, of course, fired Jimbo Fisher towards the end of the season, and we'll see what they're able to do going forward. But good God, again, they've lost anything. They've lost so much to the transfer portal. Brand new coaching staff, start over mode. They go out and get beat by Oklahoma State 31-23. Oklahoma State finished 10-4, pretty good year for them. A&M 7-6. I can't get over the thing with Texas A&M. For a long time, Texas A&M, people stopped referring to Texas A&M as Texas A&M. They started referring to them as Texas 8-4. Verbally, in comments, everywhere, Texas A&M, especially in the preseason. I don't even know why anybody bothers to do a Texas A&M preview or prediction video. We all know Texas 8-4 is going 8-4. They go 8-4 every year. Well, shit, it seems like it's been forever since they went 8-4 now. Texas A&M fans will give their left leg for an 8-4 season at this point. Came up short again this year. Jimbo gone. Huge friggin' buyout. They got there with shovels in the desert digging up nickels and dimes and shit to try to send a Jimbo Fisher to get him out of town. They brought Bobby Petrino in. That experiment failed miserably. Although I will say I do think Texas A&M's offense was better this year than what it has been over the last year or two. So I guess maybe bringing Bobby Petrino in helped a little bit. But look, the amount of money they were paying, not just for Jimbo Fisher, but for Bobby Petrino, and the money they were spending on recruiting, and I don't mean it in the illegal way. We all know it's an anything goes mentality with NIL and recruiting now, but these recruiting classes they were bringing in, it's just absolutely unacceptable. Look, if the only knock on Texas A&M is that they were losing 2 games a year and one of them was to Bama, okay, that's still probably not acceptable, but it's not humiliating. Texas A&M losing 5, 6, 7 games a year, there's just no excuse for that. I don't care who the coach is. I don't care what the schedule is. You look at the resources they have there, their stadium, the fan support, the money they pour into recruiting and facilities and coaching staffs and support staffs. It is hard to believe. Look, if you could somehow quantify, if you could take every dime that every school spends on football in any way, whether you're talking stadium upgrades, NIL money, recruiting budgets, coaching staffs, equipment, whatever, if you could add up every single dime that every single school spends specifically on football, and you could divide that by the number of wins they're getting. So in other words, how much is each school paying per win? Texas A&M is paying by far the most, and they're getting the smallest return on their investment. I don't know that there's a school in the country that's outspending Texas A&M in total when you add all of that up. Donations, alumni donations, booster donations, NIL collectives, athletic department budgets, recruiting budgets, what they spend on facilities. If you just add all that, I don't know there's a team spending more. There may be, but it's close. But those other teams are getting the wins. You hear a lot about Georgia's recruiting budget or Bama's recruiting budget. Okay, yeah, Georgia and Bama and your Michigans, your Ohio, whatever other teams you want to name. Yes, they're spending a ton of money on recruiting budgets and whatever else. But they're fucking winning. They're winning. And I'm not just talking about national titles. Ohio State hasn't won a national title in a while, but Jesus Christ, they win 11 games a year in their sleep. Texas A&M can't get to 8-4. We used to laugh at them for going 8-4. They're a disgrace and a joke. And guess what? The last 20 years or whatever that they've spent hiding from the ass-beating they got yearly from Texas, that's coming back this year. So on top of everything else, on top of everything, all the other dumb decisions they've made, on top of the Jimbo hire and the contract they gave him, and then firing and paying him all that money and losing 6 and 7 games a year and being really the laughing stock of the college football world. Yes, there are worse teams than Texas A&M, no question. But, Vandy, look, of course Vandy's worse than Texas A&M. They're Vandy. You're Texas A&M. And it's going to get worse next year. I don't think Texas A&M is going to be very good. Does anybody think Texas A&M is going to be very good year one with Mike Elko? And I like Mike Elko. I think he's got a chance to succeed there. It won't be next year. And Texas is going to beat the fuck out of you. So after a 20-year break or whatever you've had hiding from this ass beating, Texas is going to show up and give you one next year. And so on top of having to deal with the constant fucking criticism that you get from idiots like me and everybody else with a brain about how terrible and disappointing of a season you have every single year, you're going to have to hear about getting humiliated by the Texas Longhorns. Enjoy that, Aggies. Enjoy that, dummies. All right, let's take a break from shitting on the SEC. And I'm not going to take that helmet down. Virginia Tech versus Tulane. And Virginia Tech beat them. Now, Tulane's quarterback did not play. But again, talking about low-level bowl games here, it is what it is. You got to play with the people you got. This is the same Tulane team that beat Southern Cal in a New Year's Six team last year, in a New Year's Six game. This was an 11-win team, Tulane was. And Virginia Tech beat them 41-20. Now, Virginia Tech didn't have a great year overall. They were 6-6 in the regular season, and they finished 7-6. But look at where Virginia Tech's been the last 2 or 3 years, right? You've got some teams in the ACC that seem to be treading water or even trending downwards. Clemson, of course, had one of their worst seasons in a long time this year. The ACC in general was pretty piss poor, pitiful, pathetic, and sad this year. Miami was irrelevant. North Carolina was a huge disappointment. Duke ended up being probably the 3rd best team. NC State, probably the 4th best team. Georgia Tech, I believe, finished 4th in the ACC. Do you know how bad of a conference you have to be for Georgia Tech to finish 4th? So there's plenty of point and laugh things to do with the ACC, but Virginia Tech is a team in the ACC that is trending the opposite direction. I'm not here to tell you they're making the playoffs next year or winning the ACC or even winning 10 games, but we've spent so much time over the last month or whatever sort of kicking the ACC while it's down. I wanted to take this opportunity to at least point out that Virginia Tech appears to be heading in the right direction, at least for one season. We'll see if they can keep this momentum going heading into 2024. But I do think this is a good win. You can say Tulane's a group of 5 team, and I get it. But most of the ACC is group of 5 if we're being realistic. And like I said, this is the same Tulane team that last year beat Southern Cal in a New Year's Six game. I know it's not the same team as last year, and the quarterback didn't play. I get all that. They beat them 41-20. I think it's a good win for Virginia Tech. So, like I said, there's nothing wrong with pointing and laughing at teams or conferences when they deserve it, but you can't ignore the positive. And like I said, they're not setting the world on fire. They finished 7-6. But look at where they've been the last couple of years. They look like they might be heading in the right direction. And look, I've been saying for a long time, there's no reason why there shouldn't be one team in the state of Virginia that can be good consistently. I mean, a top 15, 20-ish program, not have one season where they finish in the top 20. There should be a team in the state of Virginia, whether it's Virginia Tech or Virginia, that can consistently compete within the top 25. We haven't had that. The same is true for Arizona, the state of Arizona. There's enough high school talent in Virginia, Arizona, North Carolina is another one. There should be a team in each of those 3 states that is consistently competing within the top 25, and we haven't had that. Now, North Carolina's had a couple of decent years. I think this was a bad year for North Carolina, especially considering they had Drake May. And Arizona had a great year this year out in the state of Arizona. Virginia Tech didn't have a great year. We're going to talk about Arizona more in a minute, but they had double-digit wins. So we'll see if they can keep that going. But, it seems like the state of Virginia it's got what it takes to support and to have one consistently top 25 type program. Maybe that ends up being Virginia Tech. If you're old as the hills like Uncle Lou is, you remember back in the early 2000s where Virginia Tech was a more than respectable program Frank Beamer, the whole Beamer ball deal. Shane Beamer's dad, of course, the Shane Beamer, the coach of South Carolina. His dad was the longtime coach at Virginia Tech. You had the Michael Vick years. I mean, they had some really, really good teams there. And again, not that I expect them to finish in the top 5, but it just seems like the state of Virginia, the state of North Carolina, the state of Arizona have they have the population, they have the resources, they have the high school football talent to produce a top 25 program year in and year out. So we'll see in the case of Virginia Tech if they can keep that going, and we'll talk more about Arizona like I mentioned in a minute. Let's move on to North Carolina since we were just talking about them, and we will take their helmet down. Might not put it back up either. North Carolina ought to be embarrassed and ashamed. The only team, maybe we'll do a video at the end, sometime, I don't know, end of this week or next week or something about the most disappointing teams in college football for 2023. But North Carolina's on that list. Obviously, Southern Cal would be too. But when you've got a Heisman favorite front-running quarterback and you put the product on the field that North Carolina did, you ought to be ashamed. I mean, the defense looked okay earlier in the season, but then it reverted right back to what we were used to seeing. Maybe you shouldn't have kept Gene Chizik, like Uncle Lou mentioned to you in the offseason, but you did. Mac Brown, look, it's hard to hate on Mac Brown. He is a good coach. And North Carolina is recruiting better since they got Mac Brown than they were before Mac Brown. But look, at some point, these dinosaurs need to become extinct, don't they? Go get you a young, up-and-coming, innovative coach. And this is nothing against Mac Brown. And look, North Carolina went 8-5. It's not like they won 4 games. But when you look at some of the losses they had and the amount that they lost by, and then you look at the talent they had, that receiver, Tez Marshall or whatever, ends up getting cleared and he plays, and Drake May is there, and he's in everybody's Heisman top 5. It was just a shit show of a season for North Carolina. And look, it's sort of a microcosm of what the ACC was as a whole. Miami's going to be back this year. Well, that didn't happen. Clemson going to make a return trip to the playoffs after missing it for a couple of years. They got blown out by Duke and had their worst season in over a decade, losing 4 games. North Carolina. The list goes on. The ACC is a disappointment league. And North Carolina is leading the charge there. Not only did they lose, they got blown out by West Virginia 30-10. And again, that player sitting out, Drake May didn't play. You can say that about every team. It's not a valid excuse anymore. There are so many players sitting out now that players sitting out has almost become a moot point. Okay, your best, however many players sat out. So did everybody else's best play. Like, not all of them. I know you have some teams where the players play, but in general, like it's almost a crap. Just stop. So you had a couple players that you can't beat West Virginia. Come on. And I know West Virginia exceeded expectations this year, but that's only because their expectations were in the fucking toilet. West Virginia was picked to finish dead last in the Big 12, and they had 4 new teams. They were expected to win 3 games. So, I don't want this to come across as trashing West Virginia, but it is bad that North Carolina lost to them. I mean, if you look at sort of the trajectory or sort of like the line of where teams are and where teams are headed, North Carolina is like 3-4 years ahead of West Virginia. I don't know. They're bad. And now losing Drake May. North Carolina probably won't make a bowl game next year. They're fucking horrendous. Y'all better do something in basketball. It seems like it's been a while since you've done anything there, too. I don't know. I don't watch basketball except March Madness. But, yeah, you embarrassed yourself. Congratulations. I don't know what else to tell you. 8-5. It's complete garbage. Speaking of embarrassing and some serious red flags. Where's this at? Oh, here we go. Boy, the wooden wheels are down bad. It's funny how the mind of the college football fan works. It's hilarious, actually. If your team comes out in one of these quote unquote meaningless bowl games and plays really great, and you have some players sit out, so younger players play who you're expecting to start the following year, right? And they do really good. What do you say? Oh man, this is a great sign for next year. This is a great sign for, did you see how good such and such looked? And he's going to be the starter next year. Yay, we had 4 or 5 whatever players sitting out, and we still beat this team by 2 touchdowns. You see that? Great momentum, great springboard into next season. But what happens if that same team comes out and shits the bed? What does the same fans say? Don't mean nothing. Just a meaningless game. We didn't care about this game. We didn't want to be there. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean anything. It's just an exhibition game. The coaches were just trying out new things. Well, the guy was making his first start. What do you expect? That kind of thing. It's funny how the mind of the college football fan works. And this isn't a disease that only afflicts the Oklahoma man. But in this particular case, they're ate up with it. Oklahoma looked like absolute shit in the bowl game. And here's the problem. To me, there's 2 big problems coming out of the Oklahoma bowl game. Well, 3. 3 big problems for Oklahoma coming out of this bowl game. Number 1, let's start with the defense. After years of defensive ineptitude under one Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma goes out and hires who they believe to be one of the best defensive minds in college football. I tend to agree. I think Brent Venables, at the time, defensive coordinator at Clemson, was one of the best 4 or 5 defensive coordinators in all of football. Look at the defenses Clemson was putting on the field the last 4 or 5 years Brent Venables was running the defense over there. They go out and get him. And I don't blame him. He ties to Oklahoma. They needed to go that direction, I think, considering how bad that defense had been. Year 1, the defense was absolutely horrendous at Oklahoma under Brent Venables. Now, there were some excuses made, and I think those excuses were valid. The talent level was not where it needed to be. You lost a lot of players with the coaching change. You lost a lot of players to the portal. Brent Venables did not really have time to get his players in there. All that is true. The players that did stay were basically ruined by years of terrible defensive coaching. So year 1, the defense was horrific, but you can excuse that. Then you roll into this year. Too many games with the same problems. Now, there were times where Oklahoma's defense looked good this year. There were other times where it looked like every Oklahoma defense we have seen for the last 7 or 8 years, no matter who the head coach or the defensive coordinator was. That's a problem in year 2. Go back and look at some of the prominent coaches in college football, the majority of prominent coaches in college football, and look at the overwhelming and vast improvement that was made from year 1 to year 2. Now, record-wise, Oklahoma got a lot better. No doubt, okay? Record-wise, Oklahoma got a lot better. But I think that defense is a huge problem heading into 2024, and it showed again in the bowl game against Arizona. Arizona went up and down the field. Again, I'll remind you, Arizona was a 1-win team 2 seasons ago. So, look, the Oklahoma fans want to go, well, look how much better we were year 2 under Venables than year 1 under Venables. Okay, look how much better Arizona was under a coach you can't name from year 1 to year 2. Jed Fish, by the way, is his name. They went from 1 win to 10. You went from what, 6 or 7 wins to 10? The defense was bad, and it was bad again against Arizona. And to make matters worse, the Oklahoma fan is so blinded by hope when it comes to Brent Venables and what he might be able to do defensively that Oklahoma fans spent all season blaming all of their problems on the offensive coordinator while they were busy scoring 40 points a game. The mind of the Oklahoma fan is so diseased and ate up because of what they were force-fed under years of Lincoln Riley that they can't see straight. They can watch an Oklahoma football game and have no idea what they're looking at. There was nothing wrong with Oklahoma's offense this year. Nothing. Every problem Oklahoma had could be traced to the defensive side of the ball. But the fans hated their offensive coordinator. And here's what it is. They are so, nothing can be Brent Venables' fault. It can't be the defense because Brent Venables is running the defense and Brent Venables is the savior. We brought him in to be the savior. We brought him in to turn the defensive around. We brought him in to go from making the playoffs to winning the playoffs. Brent Venables is the answer. And 2 years in, that does not appear to be the case. There is little improvement defensively on this team today versus 3 years ago under Lincoln Riley. Oklahoma fan doesn't want to hear it. They still argue with me about it. The offensive coordinator got so tired of hearing from the fans about it, he left. So you're without your offense. And look, take it from a Georgia fan. Kirby Smart, defensive mastermind, head coach. Offensive coordinator. is the most important coach on your team, Oklahoma, man. More important than Brent Venables. And what I mean by that is, as a Georgia fan, I've got no choice but to put my faith in Kirby that he's going to field a good defensive team year in and year out. He doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground when it comes to offense, period. In fact, he's been an impediment to offense at Georgia several years, mostly in the beginning of his tenure at Georgia. Offensive coordinator is the most important coach you can have. And y'all, that guy's gone. We'll see what that means going forward. And then the bowl game comes around. And the Oklahoma fan was so excited. Out with the old Dillon Gabriel, who had an amazing season. He was on people's Heisman list halfway, 3/4 of the way through the season. He single-handedly beat Texas for you. Your defense did not beat Texas. Your offense beat Dillon Gabriel, and your offense beat Texas. Out with the old, though. Dillon Gabriel and the Oklahoma fans are throwing a parade. Thank God he's gone. Thank God the offensive coordinator's gone. Now we can finally get to where we want to be. The debut of Jackson Arnold, the savior, the 5-star hero, the most college-ready QB in last year's signing class. This guy comes out in the bowl game against Arizona and looks like he's never stepped foot on a football field. And you could throw all his stats out the window, and they were terrible. What, do you have 6 turnovers? He was horrific in that game. You could throw out all the stats. Just watch him play. 0 pocket presence, 0 awareness in the pocket, no grasp of the offense. The sort of intangibles that it takes to just play the position of quarterback. So I'm not talking about arm strength or accuracy, which he clearly lacks, or mobility. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about what goes on from here to here. What you have to have as a quarterback to just run the offense, to just play the position of quarterback, getting in and out of the right plays, reading coverages, recognizing blitzes, understanding defensive fronts and alignments, getting players lined up correctly, motioning players one side or the other when you need to, all of that kind of stuff, pre-snap. And then post-snap, in the pocket, happy feet, looks confused, doesn't know where to go with the ball. Again, this isn't, I get that he was making his first start. I get that. This is a guy that's been on campus for 12 months. He's been practicing, running that offense for 12 months. He gets out there in the bowl game against Arizona, looks like he has never stepped foot on a football field. He better get a whole lot better between now and the end of August. Because if he doesn't, Oklahoma is in for a world of hurt. And that brings me to the third issue with Oklahoma. First, defensively, hard to find a lot of improvement. 2, the quarterback situation looks like a mess right now based on what we saw in the bowl game. The third problem for Oklahoma heading into next year, they're in the SEC, and it's going to be a problem. The Oklahoma team that I saw play this year, the Oklahoma team that I saw play in the bowl game, is in for a rude awakening next season in the SEC. Are they going to go 2-10? No. Are they going to go winless in the SEC? No. Are they Vanderbilt? No, they're not. But when you look at their schedule next year, and I'm doing a whole series of videos in a few weeks where I go through every single SEC team's schedule for next year because the divisions are gone. The schedules that we're used to having in the SEC for the last 20 years are gone. So depending on who you play, when you play them, where you play them, that kind of thing, the schedule difficulty within the SEC is going to be wild. Some teams are going to have what appear to be impossible schedules. Other teams are going to have what appear to be a little bit easier schedules. But when you look at Oklahoma and you look at that schedule next year, and you look at the product they put on the field this year, defensively especially, and then you look at the way Jackson Arnold look in the bowl game, if they don't figure some things out in the offseason, and they've got time. Look, I'm not saying Jackson Arnold's going to be a terrible QB for his entire career at Oklahoma. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if you look at what the Oklahoma fans said about Jackson Arnold when he was recruited and when he signed and when it was announced that Gabriel was transferring at the end of this year, and knowing that that meant Jackson Arnold had 2 weeks to practice and prepare as the starting quarterback for that game, And then you look at the way he looked in that game. Red flags, buddy. Red flags. That wagon tipped over in that bowl game, and the wooden wheels, there is cause for concern, in my opinion, for the wooden wheels heading into next year in the SEC. I think they might be in for some rude awakenings. Speaking of rude awakenings, would you be surprised if I told you that another ACC team got beat? NC State lost to Kansas State. Well, do we even want to take it? Yeah, we'll take NC State's helmet down. I'm going to take NC State helmets down because, where is it? Oh, there it is. It's one of my favorite helmets, actually. I love this NC State helmet, the matte black with the red and silver wolf on the side. Don't turn your back on the wolf back. Obviously, it's funny. Another highly ranked with in the ACC. The ACC is so bad. But I think NC State was probably the fourth or fifth best team in the ACC this year. They go out to get absolutely humiliated by a Kansas team. The reason I wanted to talk about this game, though, and the reason I wanted to talk about it now, right after we talked about Oklahoma, is because Kansas State found themselves in a similar situation to Oklahoma. Their quarterback decided to hit the portal, did not participate in the bowl game. Doesn't matter. Kansas State went out and beat NC State 28-19, finished 9-4. And that quarterback for Kansas State, Avery Johnson, who's also a freshman, who was also making his first start, he looked like a seasoned pro. Go back and just watch any random 10 minutes of the Oklahoma game and watch any random 10 minutes of the Kansas State game. The difference between those two quarterbacks and the way they look in the pocket, again, the way they run, the way they play the position of quarterback. I'm not talking about arm strength, accuracy, mobility. I'm not talking about physical traits between Jackson Arnold and Avery Johnson. Jackson Arnold's got the physical traits, or he wouldn't have been a 5-star. I'm talking about from here to here, the comfort level, the ability to just run the offense, the ability to play the position of quarterback. This guy looked like a seasoned vet. Jackson Arnold looked like he'd never seen a football. Now, Oklahoma's a more talented team than Kansas State, so we'll see what that means going forward for next year. And obviously, they're not in the same conference anymore, Kansas State and Oklahoma. So I'm not comparing those two teams to one another. They don't play next year and likely won't play for the foreseeable future. But it's worth noting that both of these teams found themselves in similar situations with the quarterback. High profile, good to great quarterbacks hit the portal. Will Howard's so good he landed at Ohio State. Okay, now we'll see how that works out there. That's not the purpose of this video, but the point is, if you watch 10 minutes of that Oklahoma bowl game and then you watch 10 minutes of the Kansas State bowl game, the difference between those two quarterbacks could not have been more glaring. And if you're Kansas State right now, you've got to be extremely excited with what you saw in that bowl game out of your first-year quarterback next year. If you're Oklahoma, you're curled up in the corner in a fetal position. More ACC losses? No. Yep. Sure is. It's a familiar topic here on the Your Season is Over video. The Miami Ducks, boy, how bad are they? Pretty bad. They're pretty bad. I want to start first here. Well, let's get the particulars out of the way here. Miami lost to Rutgers 31-24, and they finished 7-6. Another just tread water season for Miami. Rarely does the bottom fall out at Miami. They don't have, or at least they don't tend to have the years that, like, say, a Tennessee has had multiple times over the last 15 years, where you look up at the end of the year and they're sitting there at 4 wins. They've had a couple of 5-win seasons, but they get to 7-5 in the regular season and come out and lose to Rutgers. This person didn't play to opt out. You played Rutgers. You played Rutgers. Is there ever, let me ask you this, Miami fans, is there ever a scenario, ever? I don't care if it's a regular season game and maybe certain players are injured and don't play for Miami, or in this case, a postseason game and you've got transfers or opt-outs. In your mind, in your mind as a Miami fan, is there ever an acceptable scenario where you lose to Rutgers? Ever? I'm seriously asking. I want to know how low your expectations have become after 20 years of ineptitude. Because I could tell you right now, even 10 years ago, halfway into this wandering the desert routine that Miami seems to have been stuck in for the last 20 years, even 10 years ago, if I would have took a poll of Miami fans and said, is there any circumstance or scenario where losing to a team like Rutgers would be acceptable? 100% the answer would be no. Every Miami fan on the planet 10 years ago would have said no. I don't care if we're missing this player or that player. I don't care where the game is played. Don't care when the game is played. No, we're Miami. There is never an acceptable loss to Rutgers. You ask the Miami fans that same question now, it's about 50-50. You know, they're like, well, you know, it's just a bowl game. People quit. And you're looking forward to next year, and staff changes. But hey, what about our recruiting? You know, that kind of, they're like, it's, I don't know. It's amazing to me how far Miami has fallen. And there's a delayed effect on fanhood when a team starts to fall, right? If you could somehow go back in time and talk to Tennessee fans from, like, I don't know, 2010 to 2015 or 2016, they still had hope back then. Now, they had been bad for 7, 8, 9, 10 years at that point, but they still had hope. But then you fast forward to like 2017, 2018, 2019, boy, it looked like the best pig just died. They had no hope at all. And the Miami fans are sort of hitting that stride right now. Now, some of them are still a little cocky and arrogant on the internet, and they want to run around with the whole 5 rings, Ed Reed, 30 for 30, blah, 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 you know, a bunch of shit that doesn't matter. But a lot of them have come to the realization that, hey, you know what? We're just not a very good football program right now. Now, I will say this when it comes to Mario Cristobal, and I've got sort of 2 opposing points of view here. And it gets back to what I said about Mario when Miami hired him. There's still, and I said this the day it was hired, 0 doubt in my mind that from a talent perspective, Miami is going to be better this season that just ended than last season. And they're going to be better next season than this season. I'm talking talent. I'm not talking record. I'm not talking where they finish in the ACC. I'm not talking where they landed the postseason for now. I'm just talking purely talent, right? There's still no doubt in my mind that for the first 4 or 5 years Mario was there, if they keep him there that long, every single year he's there, they will have a more talented team than the year before. I've got 0 doubt about that. And you can go look at this recruiting class that just ended. Well, technically it hasn't ended. The early signing day is over. We've got another signing day coming up in February, but it's not much left to sign. It pretty much wraps up nowadays, whatever they sign. They're top 5 class. So that's bearing out to be true from a talent perspective. I also said about Mario Cristobal when Miami hired him, I'm not sold on his ability to coach on Saturdays. And there are some obvious examples this season that got magnified. The Georgia Tech situation at the end with not taking a knee. And, you know, again, that's something that we went over way too much when it happened. You just take a knee there. And, you know, the alarming part, if you're a Miami fan, is that's not the first time that's happened. He did the same thing before at Oregon, and it cost him a game there too. And he does it at Miami. And there's just some other things that go on. You got to hire the right people. I don't think we spend enough time as fans talking about coaches that aren't head coaches. I know I certainly don't. I probably can't name 20 offensive coordinators or whatever the number is. And I don't know, maybe that's okay. But you can't overestimate how important the rest of the coaches are. You can't. Nick Saban, I think, is the greatest head coach of all time, okay? Go back and look at some of the coaching staffs he had. Now, I don't say that to take away from Nick Saban's importance. One of the primary responsibilities of a head coach is to hire good coaches, position coaches, coordinators, support staff. You can't just hire a bunch of random whoopity-doos. You've got to make good hires. That's so important. And I don't know. Well, I'll ask the Miami fans, how do you grade that for Mario so far? Forget the record, forget the recruiting, take all that out of it, because obviously the record has been disappointing. The recruiting has been overwhelmingly good, right? We know that. Just 1 to 10, whatever, or letter grade, A, B, C, D, F, whatever. How do you grade at this point Mario Cristobal's ability to hire people around him? Again, it's something we don't spend enough. Here's what I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below. I feel like most college football fans are pretty familiar with their team's coaches, outside head coach, right? Obviously, we all can probably name 100 head coaches. But I feel like whatever team you're a fan of, you probably know your offensive coordinator, know your defensive coordinator, you may know a couple position coaches, that kind of thing, right? The average college football fan, and I'm including myself in this, I can't tell you who the linebackers coach is for Miami. I've got no clue. I have no idea. There's some position coaches I couldn't tell you for Georgia. But if you're a Miami fan, I'm assuming you know more than me. So I'm just asking you how you feel about Mario Cristobal's ability to hire people, just out of curiosity. But there's no scenario where losing to Rutgers is okay. And, here we are again. It's going to be another offseason. No, Miami is not 1 year away from anything. I know we're going to a 12-team playoff, and everybody, myself included, we're all going to have to adjust our expectations of what a playoff level team is, because we have sort of been programmed over the last decade to think and assume that you've got to be an elite level team to have a shot to make the playoffs. You've got to most likely win your conference. And if you don't, you got to somehow get through the regular season with one loss and then hope that there's a bunch of 2-loss conference champions or something. So we've got to sort of rewire our brains around that thought process, because that no longer exists. It's almost, at least in terms of making the playoffs, it's almost irrelevant anymore whether or not you actually win your conference. Now, obviously, there's the bye week that is going to be factored in. The highest 4 ranked conference champions will get a bye. So it's not that it doesn't matter whether or not you win the conference. It does. But in terms of making the playoffs in general, it doesn't really matter. Your goal, I don't know if goal is the right word. If you want your team to make the playoffs, this would be my suggestion to every single fan. If you want your team to make the playoffs, you need to shoot for 10-2. Are we going to see 10-2 teams that don't make the playoffs? Yes. Are we going to see 9-3 teams that do make the playoffs? Yes. But I think as a general rule, now obviously the upper echelon of college football is going to shoot a little higher than that. Your Georgias, your Bamas, your Ohio States, your Michigans, whatever teams you want to name, they're going to have a higher goal than 10-2. But for teams like Miami, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but teams like Miami, Ole Miss, Missouri, but North Carolina out of the ACC, who in the Big 12? Kansas State, TCU, Texas Tech. In the Big 10, you're talking Wisconsin, Penn State, right? These teams that have never made a college football playoff for the most part. Get to 10-2, you got a chance to get in. You got a chance to get in. Do I think Miami is going 10-2 next year? No, I don't. I'm not doing predictions. That's not an official prediction. I do my prediction videos over a 6 or 7 week period early in the summer. But my general thinking on Miami for next year is not 10-2. Again, I haven't looked at their schedule. I know they play Florida in the non-con, but whatever. Haven't looked at the schedule. So, but I'm just spitwadding here. They don't seem like a 10-2 team to me, at least for next year. But the talent level is going to get higher. But anyway, another ACC loss. Never acceptable for you to lose to Rutgers. You got to cut that out. Speaking of losing, let me find this pile of garbage. Who didn't see this coming from a million miles away? If you didn't see that coming, you're blind as a fucking bat. Ohio State, listen. It might have started out as a joke years ago, but it's just reality right now. For whatever reason, Ohio State can't beat the SEC. They can't. And there is no argument to the contrary. There's just not. There's too much evidence over too large a period of time to logically debate that, okay? You've been playing SEC teams in the postseason for 100 years. You're 2-13 now. I don't know the reason. I know what some Ohio State fans think the reason is, and it's the list of normal excuses you hear them make about every loss they've ever had. Well, we had to play below the Mason-Dixon line. We had to play closer to the other school's campus than our own campus. We had this player didn't play. Some of those excuses might fly in a one-off scenario. Not over the course of 15 games. You've been matched up against the SEC 15 times, again, over the last 100 years. This isn't a 10-year down period for Ohio State. This isn't a 10-year up period for the SEC, and so the win-loss record is out of whack. No, this is all time over the course of 100 years, whether Ohio State's a top 5 team, a top 10 team like they were this year, a playoff team, a BCS team, a top 25 team, an unranked, whatever. You get matched up against the SEC, whether it's a national title game, a playoff game, a New Year's Six game, a mid-level bowl game, whatever, Outback Bowl, fucking Citrus Bowls, you name it. You just can't win. You just can't win. And it's got nothing to do with the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world. Yeah, you can't beat them either. You're winless all time against Georgia. And that includes a low-level bowl game, an Outback Bowl. It includes a playoff game where everything was on the line. And those two games were 20 years apart. So again, it's not a thing where, you're catching us when we're down. You're winless all time against Tennessee. You're winless all time against South Carolina. And now you lose to Missouri in a game where you struggle to get a first down. You struggled to get a first. Marvin Harrison didn't play. You've got 19 NFL wide receivers. Listen, come on. Do you expect anybody to believe that the reason you couldn't beat Missouri is because you didn't have Marvin Harrison? Do you expect people to believe it's because you didn't have Kyle McCord? We know you don't even believe that. You couldn't wait to get rid of Kyle McCord. You wanted Kyle McCord out of Columbus on the first thing smoking. You lost this game for 2 reasons. Number 1, Missouri's in the SEC. Number 2, Missouri's better than you. Those are the only 2 reasons. That's it. Missouri was better than you this year. Just like 13 out of the 15 times you have played the SEC in the postseason, the team that you've played was better than you. You just can't beat the SEC. For whatever reason. What do y'all think's worse for Ohio State? Constantly being reminded that the SEC owns them, that they can't beat the SEC in the postseason to save their life, that Kentucky and Vanderbilt and Arkansas and the Mississippi schools and South Carolina have a higher winning percentage against the SEC than Ohio State does. Do you think that bothers them more? Or do you think watching their big brother, their daddy, who owns them all time, Michigan, hoist that national title trophy on Monday night? Which bothered them more? Or hell, maybe Uncle Lou bothers them more. I don't know. A lot of things bother the Ohio State man. All right, let's quit kicking that dead body known as Ohio State and move on to something else here that's actually worth our time, or maybe not. Here's one that's more of a shout out than a point and laugh. Oregon State and Notre Dame. Notre Dame absolutely destroyed them. One of the more lopsided bowl games we saw. Not the most lopsided. We'll get to that in a little bit. But one of the most lopsided bowl games of the bowl season. Notre Dame 40, Oregon State 8. Wow, an absolute beatdown. Notre Dame finishes 10-3. Oregon State 8-5. Notre Dame is interesting to me. They get a lot of hype every offseason because they're Notre Dame and their fans are obnoxious and they all have black and white TVs and wish we'd go back to segregation so they can win meaningful games again. But beyond that, though, they lost to Ohio State early in the year. One of the best games of the season, by the way. Now, there weren't a lot of points scored. There wasn't much offense in that game, and some people find those types of games boring. I don't. I like those types of games. On occasion, I don't want to watch 100 games in a row where the score is 17-14 or whatever that thing ended up being, but I don't mind watching those games. It was a great game, one of the best games of the season. Two big brands at the time. Both those teams were ranked in the top 10, top 5 maybe. And it just was a great game. And, Notre Dame came up a little bit short with Ohio State scoring that touchdown at the end. And it kind of seems like from that point forward, like that was it. No one talked about Notre Dame anymore. And in this particular case, I think it served Notre Dame well. Now, they went on to lose another couple of games, right? They had the loss to Louisville. They beat Southern Cal in probably their best game of the year. Now, it turns out Southern Cal was terrible, but if you remember that game, Caleb Williams had a bunch of interceptions and they turned the ball over, whatever. But sort of quietly, you look down at the end of the year and Notre Dame's sitting there at 9-3. They get this bowl win. They finish 10-3. So an obvious improvement from year 1 to year 2 for Marcus Freeman. And I'm not just talking about the record. We saw Notre Dame really for the first time sort of dip heavy into the transfer portal. They brought in Sam Hartman. Now they've done that again for next year. Talk about that some in the offseason. It's not the point of this video. They had a great running game. The Estime, that run, I really liked him. I thought for the first time in years, Notre Dame had some real threats at the wide receiver position. Now, they're not Ohio State level. Nobody, you're not seeing any Notre Dame wide receivers winning the Biletnikoff Award anytime soon. But compared to what they have had in the past, I guess what I'm trying to say is offensively, I kind of like what I saw from Notre Dame this year. It was a little different. It looked more exciting. It seemed to me to be an obvious increase at the skill positions on that team offensively. And if you objectively look at Notre Dame over the last 10 years, which mostly was under Brian Kelly, they had a lot of really good teams. And when they would get matched up with a great team, they would come up short. They could not compete on the outside. Their DBs couldn't cover. Their wide receivers couldn't beat elite DBs. And it became a problem. And we have seen the result of that when you look at Notre Dame's postseason record. Anytime they're in a big postseason game, sort of famously, Notre Dame hasn't won a major postseason game since 1989. They have lost every single BCS game going back to that era, every single New Year's Six game. The one time they played in a conference championship game, they lost them all. And the majority of those games were blowout losses. They appeared to me to have a significant increase in talent at those skill positions this year. Now, it didn't result in the season that Notre Dame fans want, which is 11-1, 12-0, trip to the playoffs, all that kind of thing. And look, even next year, 9-3 is not going to get Notre Dame in the playoffs. It's just not. They're going to have to go, I guess a 10-2 Notre Dame team would get in. I still have a problem with Notre Dame not being in a conference. And to me, the bar, this is just me. I'm not on the playoff committee, okay? So you don't have to spend a lot of time being mad at me about this. My opinion on this if you're a Notre Dame fan, but this isn't trolling or trash talk. I'm being complimentary of Notre Dame here. This is my true to God feelings about Notre Dame and their playoff aspirations. I feel like whatever the bar is to make the playoffs, generally, Notre Dame should be held to one standard higher because they spend their entire season knowing they don't have to play that 13th game. They don't have to play that conference championship game. And we have seen in a lot of years, we saw it this year, the conference championship game by itself can keep a team out of the playoffs. Georgia was 12-0 and ranked number 1 in the country. They lost a conference championship game by 3 points to a top 10 team, and it knocked them out of the playoffs. Now, I don't think Georgia deserved to be in the playoffs because they lost that game. So this isn't me arguing that Georgia should have been in. In fact, it's the exact opposite. for Notre Dame, they avoid that landmine purposely every year. It's not because you hear the Notre Dame fans go, well, there's been teams that make the playoffs that didn't play for their conference title. They're talking mainly, of course, about Bama. And Ohio State did it once too. But Bama got into the playoffs in 17, I think, without playing a conference championship game. Ohio State got into the playoffs in 22 without playing a conference championship game. And I get that. But the possibility was there. The possibility existed, right? For Notre Dame, it doesn't. That possibility doesn't exist. And so I feel like, I think we talked earlier about 10-2, like getting you into the playoffs. To me, for Notre Dame, if they're not 11-1 or better, I don't need to see them in the playoffs. I just don't. And the reason is, if they're 10-2, they could, in theory, make a conference championship game, but they're not in a conference. If they're 10-2 and they play in a conference championship game and lose, they're 10-3 and they're likely not getting in. But that's never a possibility for Notre Dame. So, and again, you don't have to be mad at me for thinking that. I'm not on the committee. I don't get a vote on whether or not Notre Dame gets in. But they're going to have to do better. 9-3 for sure is never going to get Notre Dame into a college football playoff, not a 12 team. So they're going to have to take another step forward next year. They lose a couple of key pieces, most notably Sam Hartman. They've already replaced him, though. So like I said, we'll talk about that in the offseason when we look at schedules and next year's rosters and all that kind of thing. But I thought this was a good year for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. And I thought this was an important year, too, because worse than Notre Dame's record last year, which was not great, the worst part about that was the losses. Like there was the Marshall loss, and then was it Stanford they lost to last year? They had two really, really, really bad losses to bad teams that had no business even competing with Notre Dame, never mind beating them. And Marcus Freeman could not afford a second year of that, right? You can lose to Ohio State. They beat Clemson, didn't they? Or did they lose to? Anyway, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying, they didn't have any losses on the level of a Marshall or a Stanford this year. And to me, that was the most important thing for Notre Dame to avoid this year, was sort of the catastrophic, embarrassing, just like out of nowhere loss. I understand that Notre Dame doesn't want to lose to Ohio State. Believe me, I get that. And I'm not excusing that loss. But let's be real here. There's a big difference between losing to Ohio State and losing to Marshall when you're Notre Dame. And they avoided that. So I do think Notre Dame took steps forward this year. Now, what does that mean next year? Well, we've got all offseason to talk about that. But I think the one thing, or the two things I think we can agree on, well, three things I think we can agree on. We all hate Notre Dame. I'm just kidding. Number two, they took steps forward this year versus last year. And number three, they're going to have to take additional steps forward next year if they want to get into the college football playoff. Great win over Oregon State. Again, you can look at Oregon State and say, well, the quarterback transferred out and didn't play. The head coach quit. He's going elsewhere. I know. But it was 40-8. 40-8. That's a beatdown. That was a good win for Notre Dame. So they're going to have to do a little better than that next year, though. 3 losses not getting them in. So we'll see. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Notre Dame and their win over Oregon State. One of the best games of the bowl season. One of the absolute best games of the bowl season. Clemson takes down Kentucky in an unbelievable game. I mean, an unbelievable game. I hope y'all watched this one. I live streamed it, didn't I? I believe I live streamed it. Boy, these games start to run together, especially the bowl games, because they get played on like Tuesday at 2 p.m, and then, Wednesday at 6 or whatever. So start to run together. But this was an unbelievable game here. Clemson holds on 38-35 and beats Kentucky again in one of the best games of the bowl. The fourth quarter of that game, one of the best fourth quarters you will see. If you didn't watch that game, find it on YouTube. Just fast forward to the start of the fourth quarter and watch from there. Up and down, no points scored, hardly at all in that game, the first 3 quarters. The fourth quarter, it was just an explosion by both teams up and down the field. It was unbelievable to watch. Edge of your seat type of game for sure. Unfortunately for Clemson, the 1 down mark, they turned the ball over. And you might have seen the video, but I'll take the blame for the Clemson turnover. It was the fourth quarter. Clemson had played a pretty good game. Cade Klubnik had played okay, and Clemson had 0 turnovers. And it dawned on me. Clemson had the ball. They were around the Kentucky 35, if I remember right. And right before they snapped the ball, I made the comment, uh-oh, we might have to turn the Clemson helmet back the right way. We're halfway through the fourth quarter, and they have no turnovers. Literally, as I finished saying that, Cade Klubnik drops back to pass. He gets hit, almost fumbles the ball. And then I literally said out loud, you can go watch it on the live stream. I said, I almost spoke too soon. I almost jinxed him. He almost fumbled it there. But he didn't fumble. He held on to it, and he threw it. A deep post. Intercepted by Kentucky. Just the Uncle Luke curse. And maybe that's par for the course with this bowl season. Because, look, I'm no expert when it comes to picking games. I'm just a college football fan. I don't study stats or analytics or X's and O's or any of that. I just watch a lot of football. I form opinions, and then I make a bunch of picks on YouTube about who I think is going to win the games. And I did all right this regular season, to be honest with you. At least with the games that I bet on, I was way up betting on games in the regular season. Now, I don't bet on every single game I make a prediction on. In fact, if I could give you any betting advice at all, it'd be number one, don't bet on a team just because Uncle Lou picks them to win. In fact, don't bet on a team just because anybody anywhere picks them to win. Do your own research. Come up with your own gambling or betting strategy if that's what you're going to do. Don't gamble more than you can afford to lose, and just have fun with it. But I made way more than I lost during the regular season. But during bowl season, I couldn't pick a game right to save my life. If I picked your team to win, it was the kiss of death. It was an absolute curse. I picked both playoff games wrong. I picked the national title game wrong. There was only a handful of games I got right in the entire bowl season. So the Uncle Lou curse extended not just to wins and losses for these teams, but unfortunately, it extended to the turnover streak for Clemson. Clemson turned the ball over at least one time in every single game this season. That's how the helmet got turned over upside down to start with. A Clemson fan about halfway through the season said, Lou, did you know we have turned the ball over in every single game? Turn our helmet upside down until we go a full game with no turnovers. And I said, okay, we got 6-7 weeks left in the season. Surely Clemson will find a game somewhere where they don't turn the ball over. Well, it never fucking happened. It almost happened against Kentucky, but the Uncle Lou curse kicked in. I jinxed them. And Cade Klubnik throws the interception in the fourth quarter into the end zone. Now, ended up not mattering in terms of who won the game. Clemson won the game. And again, it was an amazing game. A great game. And Clemson comes out on top. Kentucky goes down. Kentucky, like Notre Dame, keeps dipping into the portal for their quarterbacks. You had Will Rogers for a couple of years. He left. They bring Devin Leary in. That didn't really work. Now he's gone. Now they've brought in Brock Vandergriff, a backup at Georgia. We'll see how he does next year. Clemson will have Cade Klubnik coming back. And it's a good thing Clemson won that game. It's a real good thing Clemson won that game because the last thing Clemson needs is to head into the offseason on a one-game losing streak because they play Georgia in week 1 next year. So that one-game losing streak would have become a 2-game losing streak in week 1. So as it stands now, when Georgia beats them to kick off the 2024 season, next season in Atlanta, that will be just a 1-game losing streak for Clemson. But yeah, you already know Georgia's going to beat them down. All Georgia does is beat Clemson when they play. That's it. Georgia and Clemson have been playing for 100 years. Clemson is 18-43 all time against Georgia. 18-43. That's not a fluke win here or there. That's not a couple of teams that have only played 4 times, and so it's not an adequate sample size. Woo. No. They've played over 60 times. Okay? They've played over 60 times, and Georgia is 43-18 against the Taters. And after week 1 of next year, it'll be 44-18. Clemson, just not that good. At least compared to UGA. That's just stating the obvious there. Speaking of not being that good in general, and definitely not comparing to UGA, the most embarrassing, the most humiliating. The saddest and the most pathetic bowl performance, not this year, not in the last couple of years, not in the last decade, not this century. The worst, the most embarrassing, the most pitiful, pathetic, and the most sad bowl performance in the history of college football. We've been playing bowl games in this country for 100 years. Talked about it earlier. We're up to the point now where we're getting 30, 40-something bowl games a year. Never in the history of time has a team lost a bowl game by 60 points until now. Now, I made an entire video about this game the next day. My thoughts are crystal clear. There is never an excuse for losing a game 63-3. I don't care about Jordan Travis being hurt. I don't care about your opt-outs to the NFL. I don't care about whatever fake snowflake protect our feelings boycott you pretended to have. There is never just like there's never an excuse for Miami losing to Rutgers, there is never an excuse for anybody, any team, to lose any game by 60. Georgia is just miles better than you. And you can take the opt-outs and the quitters at Florida State into account if you want. It's just further proof and evidence of how far the gap is between a team like Georgia, who builds the right way through years of recruiting, through years of development, and Florida State, who goes and gets a couple of mercenaries out of the transfer portal. And when they don't play, you're left with a bunch of fucking deadbeats who don't know what they're doing. Not my words. Those are your words, Florida State man. You have spent the last 30 days downing your team. You have spent the last 30 days telling me how terrible your team is. You have spent the last 30 days telling me how little depth you have. You spent the last 30 days telling me how bad your backups are. Those aren't my words. Those are your words. I agree. They're terrible. Now, with that being said, I've got nothing but the utmost respect for the Florida State football players who chose to play football and not tuck tail and run, disappear, hide, take their ball and go home, tuck themselves into a corner with a security blanket and an emotional support dog and lick their fucking wounds because the playoff committee hurt our feelings. Fuck your feelings. You didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. You were never one of the best four teams this year. There wasn't a day that went by in the 2023 season where Florida State was a top four team. It didn't exist. And I told you that in October, a month and a half before Jordan Travis ever got hurt. You weren't a top four team fully healthy with Jordan Travis. That was embarrassing and sad. Ooh, boycott. We showed ESPN, Woo. We showed them. We're going to boycott the game. Nobody's going to watch it. We're going to hit ESPN where it matters, in the pocket. Good luck getting ad revenue off of this game that nobody's going to watch. Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah? This was the most watched non-playoff Orange Bowl in 7 fucking years. Retard. Which proves another one of Uncle Lou's theories. The more a bunch of deadbeat dummies run around the internet talking about things they're not gonna watch, the more they watch. I've been telling you this for years. These idiots that run around saying, oh, no, the NFL is woke, this player did that, and I don't like this, and I ain't watching the NFL, and the Super Bowl can kiss my ass, and blah, 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 blah. What do those people do? Every single year, as soon as halftime of the Super Bowl ends, what are those people doing? They're on the internet complaining about the halftime show. The halftime show that they spent the last year telling you they're not going to watch. You watched the Orange Bowl, Florida State, man. Not only did you watch it, everybody watched it. 20 million people watched it. The most watched non-playoff Orange Bowl in the last 7 years. More people watched this Orange Bowl than watched Clemson versus Tennessee last year, which I think is one of the best Orange Bowl matchups we've had in years. Was that last year's Clemson-Tennessee game? More people watched you get sexually assaulted on national television than watched that Clemson-Tennessee game, like 20 million people. So nothing you did worked. Nothing you did worked. The only thing you did over the last 30 days, Florida State, man, was drive up the price of Kleenex. That's it. Simple supply and demand issue. You got your fucking ass beat. Penn State lost to Ole Miss 38-25. I had high hopes for this game, and I guess it lived up to it. It wasn't a terrible game. 38-25, 13-point game. And in the first half, it was, I guess, pretty competitive. Kinda, I guess. I don't know. That's one I got right. So I didn't get very many games right. I got the Orange Bowl right, obviously. Georgia over Florida State. I got this one right. Ole Miss over Penn State. It was pretty obvious early in this game, I think, that Ole Miss was the better team. And here's the thing with Penn State, man. And look, yeah, I was pretty high on Penn State heading into this season. Now, there's a couple of things with Penn State that sort of people get wrong, I think, a lot of times. Not just with me, but there's just idea floating around the internet. I see it all the time that everybody picks Penn State all the time. Everybody's always hyped. Who are these people that are running around picking? Who has picked Penn State to do anything at any point in the last 10 years? Who? I picked Michigan to make the playoffs in the preseason out of the Big Ten, not Penn State. Now, I thought Penn State would finish second. I thought Penn State would beat either Michigan or Ohio State, finish 11-1, but maybe lose a tiebreaker, whatever the case. So, yeah, I mean, I was wrong on them in that respect. Instead of finishing 11-1, they finished 10-2. So what? I mean, is that really that bad? Are you that far off there? 11-1, 10-2? But yeah, I see this all the time. When are people going to stop hyping up Penn? Who's hyping up Penn State? Who are these people that you keep referring to that are hyping up Penn State? If someone picks Penn State to go 11-1 and they go 10-2, oh, I told you shouldn't have hyped them up. They were 10-2. They're our top 10 team. Now, I'm disappointed in them. The quarterback play, James Franklin. Look, I've been James Franklin's biggest supporter. And here's the other thing when it comes to James Franklin's so overrated. So overrated. By who? By who? Show me a list somewhere. Show me anybody on planet Earth. Anywhere, on the internet, on YouTube, on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere. Show me any list where anybody has ever ranked coaches, whether they're ranking just Big Ten coaches or whether they're ranking all whatever. Show me any list anywhere where anybody has James Franklin anywhere other than third in the Big Ten. It doesn't exist. Literally 90% of the people on the planet have James Franklin ranked as the third best coach in the Big Ten. Isn't he? If he's not, who is? Schiano? The guy went 7-5. Who in the Big Ten is better than James Franklin that's not named Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh? Where are all these people that y'all keep complaining about that are overranking Franklin and overhyping Ohio State? Penn State, if people keep picking Penn State to go 10-2 and 11-1, and Penn State keeps going 10-2 and 11-1, is that overhyping them? I don't get it. And again, I'll be the first to tell you, they got to do better. They got to get out of this rut that they're in. They've got to figure out a way to beat Penn State or Ohio State and Michigan. Not every year, but more than once every 7 years. And James Franklin's making way too much money to be finishing third every year. Again, Now, this changes next year because divisions are going away in the Big Ten and schedules are getting flipped on its head. But if you look over the last 5 or 6 years, James Franklin is making way too much money and has way too good of a team to have lost to Michigan and Ohio State every year. But nobody, not even Penn State fans, expect Penn State to beat Michigan and Ohio State both every year. No one expects that. Not even their fans. So there's definitely not any idiots like me or whoever it is y'all claim y'all keep seeing on the internet hyping up Penn State or James Franklin. I don't understand where that whole narrative comes from. With that being said, you got humiliated by Ole Miss, James. And don't look now, but Ole Miss is going to be a dangerous team next year. Now, shockingly to me, they just lost Quinshon Judkins to the portal. I did not see that coming. In the age of the portal and transfers and NIL, hardly anything shocks me anymore. Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma for Southern Cal shocked me. Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame for LSU shocked me. And Quinshon Judkins giving one of these to Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin and leaving there for Ohio State. That shocked me. But the list of things that shocks me when it comes to these types of things is getting smaller and smaller every year because we literally see it all almost every offseason. Starters quitting and leaving and transferring, whatever. But that's a big blow. You're talking about one of, if not the best running backs in college football next year in Quinshon Judkins. The first player in the SEC since Herschel Walker to rush for 15 touchdowns or more in each of his first 2 seasons. This guy is no joke. This guy is no joke. And a big part of what Ole Miss did this year and what they planned on doing next year. And now he's gone. Now I'm still high on Ole Miss next year. They were 10-2 this year. They may have made the playoffs this year if we had a 12-team playoff this year. And they may get in there next year. We talk about the difference in schedules and how much that's going to matter. There's no such thing as an easy schedule in the SEC anymore, but they've got one of the less hard schedules. They don't play Bama, and they get Georgia at home. So if you look at Georgia and Bama as sort of the cream of the crop in the SEC, and maybe you throw Texas in there now too, coming off of their playoff appearance, but to avoid one of those teams to get the other one at home is about the best kind of scenario you can hope for in the SEC anymore. So we'll see what that means. Again, we got all offseason to talk about that kind of thing. But Ole Miss, good win over Penn State. What else do we got? Auburn let the SEC down. Boy, we just owning the Big Ten, beating them left and right, slapping them around, making them more bitch like we normally do. And then here comes Auburn and fucking embarrasses themselves. And the SEC and me in the process got absolutely humiliated by Maryland 31-13. I don't even think Pineapple Jr. played in that game, did he? He's trying to transfer, by the way. I might make a video on this because people need to be consistent with this transfer shit, okay? Here's what I hear all the time. Transfer portal ruining college football. You shouldn't be allowed to transfer a bunch of times. There should be stricter rules when it comes to transferring. It's ruining college football. I hear it all the time. I'm sure you hear it too. You may even feel that way. I hear it constantly, year round. But every time someone transfers outside of those rules that you claim to hate, right? You want these things to be enforced. You want it to be harder to transfer. Every time somebody tries to transfer outside of those rules, and the NCAA denies it, you bitch and moan. Oh, the NCAA just don't care about these kids. This is ridiculous. They should let him play. I don't understand. This don't make no sense. How come he's not eligible? I can't believe they're not letting him play. They should give him a waiver. What do you want? You bitch and moan that the players can transfer with no rules. And then when a rule is enforced on a player and limits his ability to transfer, you get mad about that too. What do you want? Tua Jr., Pineapple Jr., right? Started his career at Alabama, okay? He played in 5 games that first year. You could only play in 4 games and still take a red shirt. Used to be 1 snap years ago. Used to be if you played 1 snap, red shirt gone. Then it went to 2 games. You can play in 2 games. Doesn't matter whether you play 1 snap or 100 snaps. You can play in 2 different games and still keep your red shirt. Then it got changed to 4 games, and that's the rule now. You can play in up to 4 games a year and redshirt, as long as you don't play in a 5th game or more. Kelly Bryant, Clemson quarterback, right? Trevor Lawrence comes in as a true freshman. Kelly Bryant is the starter. Trevor Lawrence is getting meaningful playing time in every single game, including the first quarter, sort of rotating QBs there, right? What happened after week 4? Kelly Bryant comes out and goes, you know what? It's clear that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the guy. I don't want to play anymore. I don't have any more eligibility. If I play in a 5th game and then get benched, my career is over. So he basically took himself out of the starting lineup after week 4 to maintain a year of eligibility so that he could transfer and play somewhere else the following year. 4 games you can play and still redshirt. Well, Pineapple Jr. in his first year at Bama played in not 4, but 5 games. Okay? That makes this past season that he played at Maryland his last year of eligibility. Not because of transfer rules, because of just playing out eligibility rules. You can't play college football for 8 years. I know a lot of you complain about all these players been in college football for 6 and 7 years. They haven't played for 6 or 7 years. You can't play for 6 or 7 years. You can be on teams sometimes that long if you get an extra COVID year, medical red shirt, regular red shirt, whatever, but you can't play for 7 years. So Pineapple played in 5 games. Pineapple Jr. played in 5 games his freshman year at Bama. That means this year, that was it for him. His eligibility is up. Well, turns out he's not good enough to go to the NFL. So what does he decide to do? Well, I don't like the rules, so I'm going to enter the transfer portal anyway, even though I don't have any eligibility left. And I'm just going to complain to the NCAA that they should just give me another year of eligibility. I don't like the rules. The rules shouldn't apply to me. I only played in 2 snaps in one of those games back at Alabama. It doesn't matter. You knew the rules. Not only did Pineapple Jr. know the rules 5 years ago when he played in that 5th game at Bama, he knew the rules this year or the whole year he played at Maryland. He knew this was his last year the whole time. Then the year ends. He's not good enough to go to the NFL. So what is he going to do? Well, I'm just going to transfer and complain and cry and bitch and moan to the NCAA. Yeah, I know I don't have any eligibility left, but I still want to play football. I'm not good enough to play in the NFL. So I think the NCAA should just let me play somewhere else next year. No. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. The NCAA will probably cave because there will be people that will say, this isn't fair. They should let him play. They don't care about the athletes. Those same people, keep in mind, he doesn't want to play for Maryland either, by the way. He wants to transfer again, which would be his second transfer. Keep these same people who are going to say this isn't fair, they should let him play. Those same people, an hour later, will be in a different comment section complaining about transferring. Oh, I can't believe it. All this transferring. Blah, 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 blah. Make up your mind. Make up your mind. Here's what I think. I think rules should be enforced as long as everyone knows them and everyone is operating under the same rules. You don't have to like the rules. The rules are the rules. There are rules in everything in life. Look, these people are going to quit playing football at some point and have to go get a real job. That job is going to have rules. What's going to happen when there's a rule these people don't like? Well, when I was in college, they had a rule. I didn't like it. So I broke the rule and then complained, and then they let me do it anyway. That's not how the real world works. That's not how the real world works. So the rule is if you play in 5 games, that's it. You can't redshirt. It's not a secret rule. It's not a rule he didn't know. He's known it. He knew it when he did it 5 years ago. He's known it every year since. And now he just wants to pretend like, well, there shouldn't be a rule. I mean, come on. Give me a break. And it's nothing against Pineapple Jr. Hell, he's the all-time leading passer in the Big Ten. Did you know? Boy, you want to stump your friends on a trivia question? There's one. Ask one of your college football buddies, say, hey, who's the all-time leading passer in the Big Ten? All-time. Because there's a lot of good quarterbacks come out of the Big Ten. They're not going to name Pineapple Jr., but that's who it is, quarterback from Maryland. Anyway, let's move on. To the playoffs we go. Boy, doesn't everybody feel so bad for Bama? Everybody just feels so bad for them. Everybody just feels so bad for Bama. Poor Bama. Poor Bama. If Bama could walk in that door right now, I'd sit him down in this movie theater chair and I'd pat him on his Little fucking peanut head. I just tell him how fucking proud I am of you. You tried so hard this year. And hey, Bama man, hold your head up high. You beat Georgia. Bama's got a trophy that says we beat Georgia 2023. It's fucking sad. But anyway, you did get humiliated in the playoffs against the Big Ten. Boy, here's another trivia question. Who's lost the most playoff games in the playoff era? It's not Oklahoma. It's not Oklahoma, is it? It's Bama? Wow. Jesus. Oh, boy. You let everybody down, Bama, man. You let everybody down. You got beat by the cheaters. You just weren't good enough. I don't understand. You got 19 number one recruiting classes in a row, the most talented roster in the history of college football, and you don't have one dumb fuck that can snap the ball. Not one. You don't have a single player that can snap the goddamn ball to Mildew, who's terrible, by the way. He was the second best running back in that game behind Blake Corum. He's an amazing running back. He may make a good tight end one day, too. I don't know. But what I do know, he ain't a quarterback, Jack. And I don't care how mad it makes you. Well, he beat Georgia. That don't mean a goddamn thing. He's better than Carson Beck because he beat Georgia. These simple-minded motherfuckers who watch a football game and go, well, Team A beat Team B, so therefore everybody on Team A must be better than everyone on Team B. This shit don't work that way, man. Who do you think's better between Bryce Young and Stetson Bennett? It's a serious question. Who do you think is better between Bryce Young and Stetson Bennett? It's Bryce Young. It's Bryce Young. Yet Stetson Bennett has 2 national titles and Bryce Young has 0. The winning team doesn't have, every player on a winning team is not better than every player on a losing team. It just don't work that way. Jalen Mildew's not a good quarterback. Okay? He's not. And I'll be absolutely shocked if he's any good next year with a brand new offensive coordinator. Or are you going to keep Tommy Rees? I don't know. Kevin Steele retired to the nursing home or wherever he's at. We'll see what you do. Tommy Rees might retire to daycare or whatever after school program. I don't know. Look, Alabama had a good year, okay? They're not some terrible team. But the reality is they're the most talented team in the country with the best coach in the country. And they didn't get the job done. Now, you talk to Alabama fans year round, all they want to say is we play for natties. That's all that matters. Natties. We got 122 national titles. We finished third in the SEC and lost our bowl game back in the 40s and claim a natty for that. That's all that matters to them is natties. Until they don't win one. Right? Then all that matters is beating Georgia. Unless they lose to Georgia, then all that matters, well, we got our revenge against Tennessee and LSU. You came up short, Bama, man. Your stated goal year in and year out is a national title. You came up short. And on top of that, you let the country down by losing to the cheating Michigan Wolverines and allowed them to go on and win it all. Congratulations. I mean, it is what it is. And look, here's the other thing. Can we stop with the dynasty shit? There is no dynasty in college football. There's not. Right now in college football, a dynasty does not exist. Georgia does not have a dynasty because they won 2 natties in a row. They don't. Now, they win another natty this coming year. That would be 3 natties in 4 years. Then we can start talking about a dynasty, okay? Alabama had a dynasty back in the early 2010s. Not anymore. Alabama's won 1 natty in the last 6 years. And it was a COVID natty that no one cares about. That's not a dynasty. In one of those years, you played in a Citrus Bowl that nobody watched. Okay? There is no Bama dynasty. It died a long time ago. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. It died a long time ago. The last natty that anybody cares about was in 2017. But even if you want to count 2020, fine. 1 natty in the last 6 years, that's not a dynasty. There is no dynasty in college football. Why? Michigan's a dynasty because they won 1 natty and beat Ohio State twice? No. Or 3 times or whatever. No. You're demeaning the value of what a dynasty is when you're running around pretending that you're in one. Bama, man. There is no dynasty. There used to be. Not anymore. Here. Name one other dynasty in any sport in the history of mankind where the team had won one natty in the last 6 years. Name it. There ain't one. There ain't one. If you think you're in a dynasty because you've won one natty in the last 6 years, then what do you think Georgia is, having won 2 of the last 3? Just answer the question. Georgia's not in a dynasty. I'm telling you that now. They're not. But you must think they are. If you think your team is in a dynasty when they've won one natty in 6 years, I can only imagine how good you think Georgia is. Nick Saban, is he retiring? Is he not retiring? Who gives a shit? Who cares? I don't even think Nick Saban cares. I don't care. We beat Georgia 2023. Congratulations, I guess. I don't know. Texas lost 37-31. You know what? This wasn't a close game. The score was close. The Bama-Michigan game was close. Bama-Michigan played 10 times. Probably Michigan wins 6 or 7. Bama wins 3 or 4. But that was a close game. And that's not to take away from Michigan. Look, this ain't baseball. You don't play a series. You only play one game. Michigan won. That's all that matters. But it was a legitimately close, hard-fought, tight game that you could see going either way. Hell, it went to overtime. The Texas-Washington game was not that, to me. Washington did everything they could to not only allow Texas back into that game in the fourth quarter, but to lose it. And unfortunately, Texas just couldn't capitalize on Washington's ineptitude late in that game. And I don't know whether to blame Kalen DeBoer for what I saw in the fourth quarter of that game. I don't know if it was just a result of maybe Washington as a team being inexperienced in moments that big, and the moment being too big for them and it kind of being overwhelmed there. But they made a series of decisions late in that game, from play calling to other things, that you just sit there. It was almost like they wanted Texas to win. It was weird. To me, Washington was clearly better than Texas that day when they played. Clearly. If they played 10 times, I'd take Washington 8 or 9 out of the 10. Okay? Not like Michigan-Bama where it's pretty close. I don't know what in the world. If I was a Washington fan, I can't imagine Washington fans watching that game late in the fourth quarter. You're thinking, what in the absolute fuck are we doing? Because they had dominated that game. Penix had one of the best quarterback performances you will ever see. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate, him versus this QB or that QB or Joe Burrow, this, whatever. Penix didn't have a season like that. He had a great season. He didn't have a Joe Burrow season. He didn't even have a Jaden Daniels season from this year. But in that game, it looked like you could have blindfolded Michael Penix, put him in a shotgun, and he could have easily completed a 30-yard pass. It was just, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but the whole basketball players being in the zone deal. He was in the fucking zone in that game. Up until the last 5-6 minutes of the fourth quarter. I don't know what that was going on. And then are they going to change the rules regarding an injury to a team that's winning late in a game? They already have rules that apply to the losing team when it comes to an injury, right? 10-second runoff. Because if you're losing and you're out of timeouts and you're trying to preserve clock, you can fall down, basically. Like on defense, you can just fall down. Oh, I'm hurt. They have to stop the clock, all that, right? For hurt player. So they do the 10-second runoff thing, or if there's a penalty on the defense at the end, 10-second run. But does the rule need to be changed to protect the offense in the opposite way? The only reason, Washington's ineptitude, but the second reason Texas had a chance in the last minute of that game is because basically there was Washington was going to punt, okay? They didn't get it. It was a third down. They didn't get it. And the clock was running. Texas didn't have any timeouts. The clock was running. There was basically a 15-second difference between the Gamecock. How'd they do in their bowl game? There was basically a 15-second difference between the game clock and the play clock. So Washington could have ran the play clock all the way down to 1, snapped the ball, punted it. Texas gets the ball back with 10 to 15 seconds to go. and no timeouts. And they got to go the length of the field to score to win. Instead, a Washington player got hurt on that third down play, and they had to stop the clock with 40-something seconds or whatever it was. So because a Washington player got hurt, Texas was basically awarded an additional 45 seconds of time. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong for Texas or whatever, but that's just the way the rules are laid out. Like, the guy gets hurt, you got to stop the clock to come out and look at him. It sucks for Washington because you know that guy didn't want to lay down if he didn't have to. He wants to get off that field and let that clock run, so he clearly was hurt. And I hate that for him. I don't want to see anybody get hurt, but you hate that for him in that situation. But does something need to change? I'm legitimately asking. I don't know what the answer would be, but does it seem right that a winning team gets an injured player and it results in basically a reward for the losing team because of an extra 40 second whatever? I don't know. But anyway, Texas goes on to lose. Horns down. They're also on the way to the SEC. Talked about Oklahoma earlier. It's just the reality. Oklahoma, you're going to have to wrap your head around this. But right now, Texas is much better positioned to enter the SEC than Oklahoma is. They've got more continuity amongst the coaching staff. They're going to have more returning talent. I think both their lines of scrimmage are better than Oklahoma's. Now the Oklahoma man's going to go, but we beat Texas. Woo. Yeah, and Alabama beat Georgia. And each of you don't have a national title to show for it. So, I guess you can cuddle up with that memory at night. But the point is, Texas is going to be ranked higher than Oklahoma heading into next year. Their predicted win total is going to be higher than Oklahoma headed into next year. They're going to be predicted. They're going to be favored to beat Oklahoma again next year. That's all I'm saying. That doesn't mean they'll beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma could win the game again. I'm just saying, my opinion, I think Texas is much better positioned right now to head into the SEC than Oklahoma is. We'll see. Again, schedules matter. Who you play, when you play them, where you play them, all that kind of thing matters. And we're going to talk a lot about that over the course of the offseason. But yeah, Texas did go ahead and lose. And that, of course, gave us the national title game between Washington and Michigan. And, I've congratulated Michigan on winning the national title. I've given you my thoughts on that as it relates to the cheating thing. I think Michigan was the best team in college football. I had Michigan ranked number one the majority of this season. I only moved Michigan out of the number one spot after the cheating scandal broke. That was it. Just purely watching football every week for the first 5, 6, 7 weeks of the season. I thought Michigan was the best team in the country, and I had Michigan ranked number one, and they went on to win it all. They were the best team in the country. That can't be argued or debated. They also were cheating and got caught cheating. That also can't be debated. Now, how we as college football fans look at that going forward, that's up to each individual. Obviously, the Michigan fans are going to downplay the importance of the cheating and just celebrate the national title. I don't blame them. We would probably all do the same thing if we were in Michigan fans' spot. Everyone else in the college football world, almost everyone else in the college football world, is going to always look at Michigan's national title sideways a little bit. It's just how it is. Okay. If you're a Michigan fan, don't let that take away from your enjoyment from the season. But there you go. Your season is over. Bowl edition. Boy, this is a long one too. Almost 2 hours. Was it worth the wait? I don't know. My final top 25 will be coming out tomorrow. I've got a way too early next year top 25 that's coming out soon. We are going to debut the 2024 We're Back rankings. Of course, Texas has now been removed from the We're Back rankings because they're actually back. They won a conference and made the playoffs. So they're actually back. So we got to take them off the We're Back rankings. That leaves us with just 3 teams on the We're Back rankings: Florida, Colorado, and Tennessee. Got to add a 4th team. So we'll debut that 4th team, and I will debut the way too early We're Back rankings for next year, also coming up in a couple of days. I've got a video. There are 2 teams I did not talk about today on the Your Season is Over video that I have spent a lot of time talking about on the Your Season is Over videos all year long. But I didn't talk about them today. Now, maybe that was on purpose. Maybe I purposely skipped over them so I could do a separate video. Or maybe it was impossible for me to talk about them today because they didn't participate in bowl season. I've got a video on 2 of my favorite punching bags over the course of the 2023 season. That will be coming out over the next couple of days. I mentioned schedule previews. Schedule previews are going to be, I think, way more interesting this season than the others. I do them every year, schedule previews. They're not prediction videos. Just pull up a team, click on their schedule, look at it. Okay, is it hard? Is it easy? Trap games. Where are the tough road games? All, that kind of thing. And schedules generally stay the same year to year, at least within the conference. Generally, not the case anymore. The SEC and the Big Ten conferences getting turned up on their head. So a lot to look at with the conference schedules. So we're going to do a whole series of SEC schedules, a whole series of Big Ten schedules, and I'll do the other conferences too, the ACC, the Big 12, so forth and so on. But I got a lot of videos planned over the next couple of weeks. I really enjoyed this season with y'all, and your season is over. I hope y'all will stick around for what some people refer to as the off season. There is no off season here. I talk college football year-round, 365 days a year. We're going to get back to the call-in shows starting tomorrow, Thursday, at 8 or 9 o'clock. So feel free to give me a call. Talk about what you thought about your team over the course of the season. We can talk about the playoffs or the national championship game. Talk about whatever you want in the world of college football. We're going to get back to the call-in shows tomorrow night, Thursday night, and then we'll do that every Tuesday and Thursday year round. So I hope you don't run off. Hope you stick around. I really enjoyed these Your Season Is Over videos. I hope you did too. And I'll see you again next time. Have a good morning.